Good morning, Kansas City. Welcome to another edition of KCPS Homeroom on this ELA Tuesday. I'm your teacher today, Chris Odom. I'm English coordinator for the Kansas City Public Schools. So today we're going to talk a little bit about a book called Racism in Kansas City, A Short History, and review a term called content vocabulary. Okay, the author of this book is C.S. Griffin. He went to Rockhurst College, which is right near where I work for the Kansas City Public Schools, so I drive by it every day. He's known as a political author and an activist, and again, this book came out in 2013, and it's called Racism in Kansas City. We'll use a small bit of it today to talk about two passages and apply what you hear to an idea called content vocabulary. Okay, let's just talk a little bit about today. Content vocabulary, we're going to get a definition going. It's a little different than academic vocabulary. Academic vocabulary are the words that you need to think about the kind of learning that you do in specific classes, like evaluate or analyze. We call those words academic vocabulary. They show up in most of your subjects. Content vocabulary is a little different, and we'll look at why. Okay, we're going to work on doing something called annotating, and I'll show you what that looks like on a couple examples. When we annotate, we're looking for significant words, sometimes words we don't know, and words that are a big part of the overall meaning of the text that we are studying or reading. I'm going to read two paragraphs from a particularly interesting part in this book, and we're going to apply that to the ability to listen for context clues, and then how we might use annotation to help track the developing meaning that we're reading. Okay, content vocabulary. You may have seen an example like this one, where if you put the definition in the middle, it really helps you think about really what it means, what are the characteristics of that word, and what are some examples of that word, and then what are some non-examples. Because you can say what it's not, then you're really able to speak on what it is even more clearly. Okay, so content vocabulary, just to get that definition out there, are words that are specific to the central meaning of the text, and they're often crucial to our understanding of the text. When you think about that word crucial, that means that without them it wouldn't mean the same thing. Okay, so we're going to try a passage in this book, and we're really going to be listening for this word and thinking about what it means. So I'm just going to kind of throw that out there, and I will tell you this image is significant. It has a little something to do with more the abstraction of the meaning of this word. But see if you can pick out exactly what it means in the passage that I'm going to read. And while you're doing so, I would also like you to listen for other words that you think are crucial to the meaning of this passage. Okay, here we go. This entrenched social and economic separation is now an accepted part of life in Kansas City. In 2011, researchers from Brown University and Florida State University ranked Kansas City 23rd among America's most segregated cities. Integration here is better than in Detroit, New York, Chicago, Los Angeles, and St. Louis, but worse than Nashville, Richmond, Minneapolis, St. Paul, Phoenix, Las Vegas, and Atlanta. The ranking is an improvement from previous studies, owing in part to an increasing black population, a 13.4% of the greater metropolitan area in 2011, and middle-class blacks joining whites in the suburbs. But segregation is not the deadliest issue. Okay, and so in that one paragraph, you may have heard that word early on. Would you pick out any other words in that passage that you think were central to the meaning? Let's explore what this word might mean and put it back in the context that it exists with this sentence up here. You notice it says this entrenched social and economic separation is now an accepted part of life in Kansas City. And that's an interesting quote, because I sure believe that most of Kansas City doesn't just want to accept that part of life, but it seems to point to maybe it's entrenched. So what does that really mean? Did this cavernous space between these two rocks just appear one day? Or did it take a long time for it to become what we might see there on this image? In some ways, entrenched might have a similar meaning, that it becomes so much a part of the day-to-day life that it becomes something that we think we're so used to, right? And when it's talking about this economic and social separation, there's some other words in this specific paragraph that might help point to other meanings, like segregation or integration. Okay, so we're going to apply the same strategy one more time, and I'm going to read on the next paragraph. And if you're working with us at home, you're probably going to want to try this next technique called annotating. And while you're reading, you can do some active behaviors that will help you remember later on what you were reading, especially helpful when you're studying, and especially helpful when you're really preparing yourself maybe for something that you're going to do based on what you read. Then you don't have to have it all memorized, and you've got all these nice marks in your book that help you remember what you were thinking while you were reading. Okay, so maybe you might underline words that you need to go back and look up, or look up in the moment. With the technology that we all have, you really could just stop for a moment and find out what that word means. And then you're going to write some important thoughts in the margin, maybe some notes that you had. When I look back through my book, I see I have post-it notes and other things that we might consider those forms of annotation. Okay, so last paragraph I'm going to read, and I'm really just going to chop into this paragraph a little bit, and then we're going to go from there, and you're going to apply this strategy. Okay, so I want you to think about listing some significant words that you hear, and then perhaps list some of the words that you may not know all the way to look up later. There's been a sharp increase in the number of extremist hate groups in the U.S. since Barack Obama's election. Regression always threatens to undo the gains for which so many fought. A 21-year-old white man who read hate group literature allegedly massacred 9 African Americans at Emmanuel African Methodist Episcopal Church in Charleston, South Carolina on June 17, 2015. The tragedy revealed how far white denial and ideas of racial transcendence could go. The suspect posted photos of himself online in a jacket with historic flags of apartheid regimes in Africa. In other photos, he held the Confederate flag. The attack coincided with the anniversary of Denmark Vesey's planned slave revolt of 1822. Vesey helped found the church where this attack occurred, and possibly planned the revolt there. The suspect reportedly told the congregation before firing that he was there to shoot black people. Okay, so again, we're reading this book and thinking about the overall title. We're thinking about the vocabulary. We're thinking about the significant words that help paint the meaning in this extremely important reading about our own city. So did you hear some significant words in that passage? Did you hear words you might want to look up later? Did we hear words like transcendence? That's a big word. Racial transcendence. We heard apartheid and regimes. We heard the word tragedy. We heard the word massacred. So you can see how when you start to collect some of these words and put them back together, it might help you with this next part. What did they help you think about might be the central idea of what we just read? Remember, we've done that in the past. And again, the vocabulary really is the best way to start to understand what's being talked about in each passage. Okay, so which words carried the meaning of the passage I just read? When we talk about carrying the meaning, right? He's carrying some meaning. But the words in a passage or any form of writing help carry the meaning because they contain a lot of information, and they also contain kind of emotional significance. That's both the connotation and the denotation of words. Okay, last thing we're going to think about is when you go out there and you find something to read, I want you to work on annotating and looking for the crucial words that help us understand the meaning of the passage. Also look for some of these amazing cool words that you might not know all the way what they mean, but when you look them up, it really expands your understanding of what you were reading about. I hope this has been helpful in having you think about how, again, content vocabulary might be a big part of what you do at school every day. Maybe we've given a couple strategies to think about with annotating, and certainly looking at words for their overall meaning of the text. I hope you're having a great day out there, Kansas City. Have a great one. See ya.